July and August is the time when most couples in Scotland decide to get married. We only have a small amount of time when the weather might be warm enough and the sun shining. Pledging your love in front of friends and family is one of the most special times in anyone's life. But sometimes, even the excitement of marrying the love of your life can have a devastating effect. Grace Ferguson from Limekilns in Fife had just married Richard Colville from Charlestown, also in Fife. They were getting married at the Queen Anne UV Church in Dunfermline, Scotland, in 1905. As Richard slipped the ring on his wife's finger, Grace suddenly collapsed and died. The excitement and nerves had led to a heart attack. But on a day where emotions are running high, lots of alcohol is consumed, this can lead to horror and tragedy. And here we have some wedding stories from around the world where things have indeed gone terribly wrong for the couple. In 1892, a couple had just got married in Villaja, Texas. The groom, a man named Harry Fellows, arrived at the inn where they were to stay on their wedding night with his beautiful bride. Harry was a wealthy farmer who was respected, but somebody who could also have a bit of a temper. When the couple arrived, they were recognised by some young men who engaged in some good-natured banter with the married couple. But Harry was not happy with this at all. He didn't take it in the spirit it was meant, and an argument took place. Later that night, the young men, reinforced in numbers, stood in the street outside the couple's bedroom and started to hit pots and pans together, making a terrible and constant din. Harry, his face red with rage, stepped out into the balcony and demanded the men go away. This show of anger only inspired the hellish musicians to redouble their efforts. Harry went back into his room and a few seconds later stepped back into the balcony, this time with a pistol in his hand. Harry fired 3 times at the crowd, killing 2 men. As he aimed the gun to fire a 4th shot, his wife seized his arm. Before the couple could make a retreat back to the safety of their room, a hail of shots was fired at them from the men below. Both bride and groom fell back into their room, dead. A French wedding party took to the streets in a village near Charleroi in 1896. The couple-to-be and the guests were making their way from the church. An old woman related to the bride decided to join in the tradition of firing celebratory shots into the air. This elderly lady took out a pistol from underneath her shawl. She raised a long bony arm into the air. Just as she pulled the trigger, her strength gave way and her arm fell. Her hand shaking, one shot was fired, and this blew a cigar clean from the mouth of a wedding guest. Another shot hit the groom in the ankle, and the last shot hit the old woman's 8-year-old niece in the temple, and she dropped down dead. 3 years earlier, in 1893, in Mount Hamilton, Ireland, a man was loading a pistol, hoping to fire into the air to celebrate a wedding. This man, a farmer called Taylor, was loading his gun when it accidentally went off. The shot hit and killed Taylor's nephew, who was standing waiting for the wedding procession. These stories were accidents, but what if the shooter had his gun loaded with murderous intent? A bridegroom had just arrived at the house of his new bride in Rue Saint-Denis, Paris, in 1883, when the bride's uncle stepped forward, aimed a gun at the groom, and pulled the trigger. The groom fell seriously wounded to the floor. Before the assassin could be taken, he swallowed poison and fell down dying. The uncle had left a note stating he did not like the choice of partner his niece had made, and made up his mind to kill him. If your uncle shooting your groom was not bad enough, imagine your own brother trying to shoot you on your wedding day. That happened to a young bride in Birkenhead in 1894. The bride's brother worked for a firm that hired out wedding carriages. When the brother asked his sister to hire her carriage from his employer, she refused. As the bride walked into the chapel, her brother Frederick drew out a pistol and fired a shot, which luckily missed. He then shot himself in the heart. In the same year as the last story, a wedding party was making its way to church in Paris, when a man who'd been jilted by the bride stepped in front of her and shot himself dead. Another couple in France were making their way from church to the village of Ponnet in 1890 in a large procession with a band playing at the head. Suddenly a shot was heard, and the groom fell down dead. Another shot, and the bride crumpled to the ground, clutching her abdomen. She would die from her wounds that night. A third and last shot was heard, and that was the shooter, a rejected former lover of the bride, who turned the gun on himself. In 1888, a groom was killed in Knocknamuckly parish church in Ireland by a love rival called William Thompson. Some of Thompson's relatives were arrested for assisting him. Thompson's sister-in-law encouraged him to kill the groom. He armed himself with a gun and knife, and a niece disposed of the knife after the crime by throwing it in a canal. In 1906, France, a young man called Martin, living in the village of Belfort, was overcome with feelings of jealousy after hearing his childhood sweetheart was going to marry a dashing young sergeant in the Dragoons. On the morning of the wedding, as the bride made her way up the steps of the church, screams could be heard from inside. Suddenly, out of the religious building stumbled Martin, blood pouring from a deep gash in his neck, holding a blood-stained knife. The bride staggered backwards as the man approached, and he fell at her feet, covering her wedding dress in blood. The bride fainted and was taken home and put to bed. When someone checked up on her a few hours later, she too was dead, unable to live with the guilt of the death of her young friend. She had turned on the gas. It is not always the bride's admirers that crack under a sea of jealousy. In 1909, Toulouse, in France, a couple were entering the mayor's room to conduct a civil ceremony. A woman stepped forward and plunged a knife into the neck of the groom-to-be. This woman had been his mistress and had left her husband and had lived with the groom for 5 years. In 1888, Chicago, a bride and groom were in the room at the groom's parents' house. The couple were fooling around as the groom got dressed. The bride went to take the groom's watch, stating that as they were married it was now rightfully hers. "So, you mean to turn highway robber?" he said with a smile. "Then I will turn highwayman," he stated, taking a pistol from his pocket. "Stand and deliver," he said. The young woman made a playful grab for the gun. As the couple frolicked, it went off. The woman stumbled back as a red stain spread across her white nightdress. She'd been shot in the chest. Falling to the floor, the woman looked up at her young sister, who'd ran into the room. Her last words were, "Oh, Kitty, look what David has done." Some ancient customs, observed for years, can go terribly wrong. In the village of Tarpley, Cheshire, an old custom of firing the anvil was observed in 1905. This involved filling the hole in an anvil with gunpowder, plugging it with wood, and firing it using a red-hot poker. 2 villagers were married, and a wheelwright tried to celebrate the happy event by firing the anvil, but it failed to detonate. A short time later, the wheelwright and the brother of the bride was examining the reason for the failure for it to explode, when suddenly it went off in the wright's face. He died a few hours later. The bride's brother was uninjured. Even something mundane and simple can lead to tragedy. Alice Downing was looking forward to her wedding in Brixton, London in 1913. Alice had gone to a neighbour's house to show off her wedding dress. As she strutted her stuff, she tripped over a carpet, fell, struck her head on the floor, and died. After a wedding, the guests were taking a stroll through the fields in Saint-Quentin, France in 1904. As they walked, the bride's father noticed a bull eating his newly gathered pears. The man rushed towards the animal, his arms waving, trying to shoo it away. The bull turned towards the oncoming man and charged. It thrust its horn through the body of the man and killed him outright. The groom tried to go to his new father-in-law's aid and was twice tossed into the air by the angry animal and had his back broken. In 1932, a Polish wedding party were driving in sledges across the frozen loch of Krans when the ice cracked and gave way. 2 sledges carrying 7 passengers were thrown into the ice-cold water. 5 were rescued, but the young couple were lost. A house in Greece was packed to the rafters in 1866. The wedding was being held within the building by 2 priests. As the ceremony was taking place, those upstairs all tried to get down to see the event, so they rushed the staircase. This caused the top story to collapse, burying all those below. 17 people were killed, including the 2 priests and the young couple. So, you have survived the ceremony, the toasts have been made, and the best man's crap jokes are over, and you're sitting down to eat. But the danger is not over. A double wedding had taken place in Chalet, France, in 1913. 2 brothers had married 2 sisters. After a long day, the party sat down to eat. Shortly, several of the guests complained of severe stomach pain. Only those who'd taken a dish containing cream were affected. 12 people died, including the 2 brides and their mother, and one of the grooms. So if you're planning on getting married, and do manage to live through the lead up to the happy day, the ceremony and celebrations, I wish you a long and happy life together. If you've enjoyed this story, please like and subscribe. You might like to take one of our dark history tours, ghost tours, or paranormal investigations that are held in Perthshire, Glasgow and Stirling. If so, please visit our website, which is www.historyandhorrortours.com. Thank you.